All right. Hey, so I am Len Cunningham, and I'm the lead narrative designer and game writer for Eyes of Hellfire, which is a gothic horror multiplayer game that is set in the Hellfire Club and also contains a lot of mystery and stories around the Hellfire Club, the group, as well at the same time. And I'm here with Neil Jackman. Neil, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Len. I'm Neil Jackman. I'm an archaeologist. I have a company called Abarta Heritage. We tend to focus on engaging the public with the story of the past. The Hellfire Club, somewhere that looms large in my mind. We've done a couple of excavations there, and yeah, it's a special, weird, story-filled place. So I was happy to have a chance to talk about it.
I mean, I'd say it's a big site of interest for people all across Ireland and a lot of people outside of it as well at the same time.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of it is around the stories that you hear, as you're growing up, rumors and legends and such, and then also the nature of the place itself, which is why we decided to create our game around it. So I was curious, what drew you to the Hellfire Club originally, Neil?
Yeah, it's a funny one, right? Because like I'm down in Tipperary, and I obviously, as you could probably tell with the accents, I'm a blow-in anyway. So I never kind of grew up with the Hellfire Club looming large in my mind, But you talk to a lot of Dubs, particularly people in the south side of Dublin, and it's always been this kind of big landmark for them. But at the time I first came across it, I was back around, I think, 2014, a little more than 10 years ago anyway. I was writing a series of articles for the journal.ie with the intention of helping people or encouraging people to go and visit historic sites around Ireland. And I was doing a Halloween special. So, of course, where else would you go? I'd heard about the Hellfire Club, but I hadn't really visited it before. And I went up and I was really taken with the place, not just obviously because of the creepy, weird looking building, but the views from up there are spectacular. And
Spectacular is the only word for it, I think.
yeah,
Absolutely incredible.
it really is. You got this panoramic view straight across Dublin City itself, out of Dublin Bay. And you can see when you stood there, you can look across to the next mountains and you see these bumps on top of them, which are these 5,000-year-old tombs, right? And my eye kept just getting drawn to this mound at the back of the Hellfire Club, this little grassy mound. And I knew it had been recorded by Geraldine Stout as being a possible passage tomb. And as I was doing the research on the site, I just found myself getting drawn in to the story. And it's such a kind of crazy story. You can't help but be drawn into it, right? Because there's this whole folklore about it being like the building itself was built by a guy called, I won't get into all the history just now, don't worry, but the broad brushstroke of the story is that it was built by a guy called William Connolly, who was the son of an innkeeper from Ballyshannon in Donegal, fairly standard middle class kind of upbringing. But he went on to become a lawyer, a barrister. He specialized in land transfers and he became the richest man in either Ireland or Britain at the time. He became extremely wealthy. And it's he who had Castletown House outside of Selbridge, if people are familiar with that. That was his main residence. And he had the Hellfire Club built as his hunting lodge. And all the stories say that to build a Hellfire Club, he destroyed an ancient tomb or an ancient cairn. And the, that outraged the devil so much that the devil blew the roof off the building. But Connolly, being so wealthy and powerful and proud, had it rebuilt again in stone to defy the devil. And then it later becomes this haunt of depraved and debauched aristocrats. How can you not fall in love with a story like that? So that kind of set me off then. And once you get a story like that gets its hooks in you, I think you kind of have to follow the threads.
That's a great way to put it, is it gets your hooks in you. It's like you
Mm.
see the outside of the facade of the building, or you hear the name of the club, or something gets you about the story. There's something very deep rooted there that pulls you in, and then the more you learn, I find it was just like falling down a tunnel for me,
Yes.
Alice. Kind of falling down the rabbit's hole thing. Where you learn one thing, and the next thing you learn is also intriguing and fascinating about the people involved, the building itself, the location of it, the view, and then, like you said, what lies beneath.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell me a little bit about your dig?
Yeah. So, once you're kind of interested in a story like that, you start to think about, well, I wonder if it's true, or I wonder what we could prove, or I wonder how we would go about approaching it. And as I said at the beginning, kind of, I've always had a big focus on how do you engage the public with archaeology? How do you get people to care about this stuff, right? And not necessarily just that these are important monuments like Newgrange and so on, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of the process of archaeology, how do you give people the opportunity to perhaps take part or to see how we go about the whole thing? So from day one, the whole project was designed as a public engagement project that people could take part in. So we did lots and lots of sort of work with local schools and so on to kind of let people know about what we were going to do. But the approach that we took was we did geophysical surveys to get a bit of a feel for the site. And we wanted to put in two, I would call it kind of surgical trenches to understand as much as we could without damaging too much of the site at the same time, right? So somebody could go back in the future and re-examine to see if we were correct or not, and so
Of
on.
course, yeah.
Yeah, so and that's the process of archaeology, really. So this was 2016. We did the main dig. We put in two trenches. So if you're familiar, well, you'd be well familiar with the site now, but if you go to visit it, behind the Hellfire Club, you'll see there's this quite distinctive mound. It's not very big, like it's not massive. But that was the thing that was recorded as potentially being a passage tomb. Now, for people who don't know, Ireland is pretty blessed with megalithic tombs. We've got a good few different types.
Definitely true, yeah.
And actually, the Dublin Mountains is one of our most important prehistoric landscapes in Ireland. And a lot of people don't realize that. We've got portal tombs there, we've got wedge tombs, we've got passage tombs. We've got this really good array of, and some really important examples. Now, what a passage tomb is, the most famous example are those ones in the Boyne Valley, Newgrange and Knowth, where essentially you have a stone-lined passageway, which gives it its name, that leads into a burial chamber. And inside the burial chamber, you could expect to find largely cremations, but sometimes inhumations as well, of men, women, and children. Sometimes you get things like, the mound would be made of either stone or earth. But the picture people have of passage tombs is very much dominated by Newgrange and Knowth, but those are kind of like the spectacular examples. And they're a little bit different to what you would find elsewhere in Ireland. I always call them like the death worshippers of the Boyne Valley because they kind of do things to such a big extent, right? But if you go to Sligo, to the likes of Carrowkeel, the tombs of the Dublin Mountains would have been more like that. So they would have been smaller, much smaller. Instead of 70 meters across, maybe half that size at most, 30-ish, thereabouts. Uh, Mounds of stone, largely, and quite simple.
Yeah.
So we weren't kind of expecting anything as elaborate as those Boyne Valley ones. So what
So
we
what were
wanted,
you hoping to find then as a result of this
yeah.
dig?
So the big question we had, right? You've got that mound, and you have that story that this cairn was destroyed, but what was there a cairn there in the first place, or is that just kind of part of the folklore? That's one question. The next question, if there is, can we identify it to what type of monument it was? And if there's, does that mound represent any intact archaeology? Or is it essentially like a quarry pit or like a big pile of rubble and mess that was left after the construction in the 18th century? And what we found was that there was a whole heap of disturbance, as you would imagine, right?
Of course,
And
yeah.
not only from the 18th century kind of messing, but I'd say like that was a spot that I think has been used as bonfires for generations. Like I think we got the best assemblage of Dutch gold cans ever found on an archaeological dig, kind of a thing.
No
But we
surprises there then.
no surprises whatsoever. But we found what we were looking for. We found intact archaeological context. We
Incredible.
found the base of a stone cairn. We found, and a stone cairn is like a mound of loose stone, essentially, and it's a mix of like granite and quartz and a lot of things like that. We found parts of an earthen revetment preserved that would have sort of stopped the dry stone cairn from slipping backwards. Um, And we also found a number of artifacts as well, which kind of told us an awful lot about the importance of that as a place. So we found flint tools, because this is the Stone Age, essentially. This is before metal was in Ireland. We found a beautiful polished stone axe head, which was an incredible discovery. And what was so special about that was it was still sharp. It had never, ever been used. And they'd made it and broke it deliberately to be inserted into the tomb. Now, similarly broken axe heads have been found at places like the Mound of the Hostages on Tara. So there's a little bit of a theory, much like we see with the Vikings later on, or perhaps with some Bronze Age context as well, that if you kill an object in this world, it might make it usable in the next world. It could be a little hint of belief there. We're not sure, but it was deliberately broken, this axe,
That's
before
amazing.
because these axes would have took so much effort and time to source the material and to work. It's like breaking a car and putting it in there. It was valuable to them. It was like ritually killed. We
That is
also found this.
absolutely amazing and very in
Oh,
keeping with the kind of tone around stories regarding the Hellfire Club as well. And it's something that I actually
yeah.
hadn't heard before. So that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. We found a mushroom-headed bumpkin as well, which is a typical. You'd find them in context with Irish passage tomb traditions, you know. And we found probably the most special thing of all, which is megalithic art. So if you visit the tombs in the Boyne Valley, you'll see they're absolutely covered with those kind of spirals and circles and so on. None of the tombs in the Dublin Mountains and the tombs of the Dublin Mountains, I must say, they're not particularly well preserved. A lot of them have been kind of had forestry plantations and so on. They've been ransacked over the years and such. So they weren't in brilliant condition. But no examples of megalithic art was ever known in the Dublin Mountains until we found this.
That is
And it was,
incredible. That is
yeah,
amazing.
it is. Now, it was, there was this large stone in the middle of the trench, just in the hollow. And I thought the stone looked interesting. So I made sure that the trench was going to
You
go.
were very careful in your targeting of your choice of
Yeah,
spot there.
yeah. But it was sitting at the surface, right? So it was out of its what you'd call context originally. And people had been using it as the edge of a bonfire for generations. So it was black on one side, And while we were moving it to one side to dig the trench, it kind of cracked because it was so fire shattered and broke. But we just put it next to the trench. And honestly, it was the stone we sat on every day when we were filling in our recording sheets. And, you know, now bear in mind, we were digging this site in October. It was coming up to Halloween just for what better time to be digging at the Hellfire Club if you want to
Yeah,
make sure you get cursed, dig it at Halloween. Um, but because of that, it was a really weird spell actually because it never rained at all. I think it rained one day for 10 minutes in October in the Dublin Mountains,
how odd
So
and eerie.
yes, very strange. But the sun is quite low at that time of the year, and we were starting one morning, and I was just chatting, with the crew, and we were kind of talking about what we are going to do. And as I was talking, my eye just looked at the stone, and you could suddenly see it. You could suddenly see these concentric circles on it. And I was like, Christ, that's not art, is it? And we all just kind of stopped, and jaws dropped, and the sun moved, and you couldn't quite see her again. It was almost like it disappeared. But we
That's
got
like magical. Oh my God.
yeah, it was. It was the strangest occurrence I think I've ever had in archaeology. And we had the Discovery Program Islands Research Archaeological Unit come out and do laser scans, which proved the art was there. We had
Oh my
Elizabeth
God.
Shee Tuig, one of our leading megalithic experts, to come out. Photogrammetry carried out. Now, all of this definitively proved it was megalithic art. But as I say, if we hadn't have dug it in October, if we would have dug it in the summer when the sun is so much higher and flatter, we never would have seen that art. So it was a pure chance. So that was really special. And typically, you only find that kind of art. It's usually in association with a passage tomb as well. So although the site was very, very badly damaged, although it was about as trashed as any monument could ever be, it still told us a story about what it was and what it was likely used for. We got 3 radiocarbon dates as well. 3 dates. We always need more. We're always happy with an archaeologist, as an archaeologist, with a whole heap of dates, because then you can kind of refine and narrow it down. But those 3 dates we did get are telling us it dates to in and around about 3,500, 3,600 BC,
Oh my
which
God.
is about a good 400 years older than Newgrange.
Oh my
There or
God, that
thereabouts.
is
So
absolutely
yeah.
incredible. It's so interesting because I mean part of the reason why we're thinking about the Hellfire Club for Eyes of Hellfire was this idea of something being sort of ever present in our childhoods and hearing
Mhm.
about it very often. It exists there, but then bringing it to more people and exposing it and having people learn about it and share with it. It's sort of it's a weirdly similar thing to finding something that's always been present. It's been used for bonfires. It's been sat on. It's been sat
Mhm.
next to. It's been covered under a relatively thin layer of earth. And to bring it out and show everyone the kind of magic of that is absolutely incredible.
Oh, it's such a privilege to be a part of that, and we're so lucky in Ireland, because our past is ever
Absolutely.
present. It's everywhere, and once you start to notice it, it's just I'm sitting in an office here in Clonmel, overlooking the town walls that Cromwell failed to get through.
Yeah.
It's looking across to a medieval church. Everywhere you look here, within pretty much everywhere, there's the mark of past generations. There's past stories, and few few you know, sites have quite as dramatic stories as the Hellfire Club, right? But still, it's something very special about Ireland that we have those layers and layers of lives all upon each other.
Yeah.
Whether it's going back as far as the Neolithic or the medieval period and such, it's a great place to be if you're interested in that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
What do you think? It's interesting. What do you think draws people to the Hellfire Club in particular in Ireland?
Mm.
Because it's something, people have been honestly making up stories about it as well since they're used
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of the time too. So there's
yeah.
something about it that really captures our imagination, and maybe that's largely due to the site itself. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's really funny, because you're right. Everybody's got a story about it. Everybody that knows it, and I think, firstly, look, it's great branding. What a name,
Yeah.
the Hellfire Club. My God, you're automatically interested, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first one, and secondly, it lives up to it a bit as well. It is a creepy, gnarly looking building.
Absolutely.
Now,
It's foreboding, like
Bob,
atmosphere and energy from it the second you lay the eyes on it, I think. Yeah.
exactly, and we could go into some of the reasons for that in a moment, but what we have to remember is what we're looking at now is a very devastated ruin of what it was. It was at one time plastered and whitewashed. It would have stood out in the landscape as a very fine Palladian looking or near Palladian looking building, but when you're going up there today, it's just perched there. It's got this real kind of um, presence on the landscape. And there was somebody who wrote, I think it was can't remember his name now, a historian wrote, if you go to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, looming above the capital, they have this great figure of Christ. Looming over our capital in Ireland, we have this place associated with devil worship
Yeah.
and debauchery.
It
It's
suits
kind
us. It suits us really, doesn't it?
of, it does. I think it gives a bit of
Yeah.
character to Dublin anyway,
I've heard a lot of
Uh,
people describe it as hanging over the city as well,
yeah.
kind of like a bat. It's kind of evokes sort of, I don't know, an image of Dracula or something too. It's very gothic in the way people
Yeah.
talk about it too.
Yeah, I think so. And as I said, we were kind of doing very much a public engagement kind of a thing. And so we had all of these school groups coming up, but we also, from the beginning of the day, you'd start to see people coming over curious about what we were doing and all of this kind of stuff. Um, but the amount of stories they'd start telling you about their associations with it, the amount of kids you would see walking backwards around it 13 times because they've been
Really?
told that
Do you see a lot of that?
devil will appear for them. Yeah. Honestly, every day you'd see kids going backwards around it, and it's funny. It's just these kind of constant themes keep coming out about it. And I think it's, yeah, because of all of those reasons and because families and people make their own associations there as well, right? It's the kind of place where young people go for the first drinks and messing and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that's keeping in tradition with
Yeah.
with the place, right? They're not the first to have done it up there. Um, I think because people have those personal connections to the thing as well, that it's not just this sort of historic site with this big story. it has that personal connection. I think that keeps people coming back. They bring their kids, they bring their kids, and so it goes. Yeah. So that's all built into it.
Yeah. So you mentioned like during the dig having, local people around involved and everything in the process of doing it. Any strange or unusual occurrences in the process of that dig?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were a few. I mean, it's a funny thing, right? Because like archaeology, yeah, look, it's an odd job. In some ways, it's a wonderful job, but it can be a bit strange. But it's particularly strange when you're doing it in such a public way. Yeah, I mean, by the end, we were getting 500-600 people every day coming up the hill. You're getting coach loads of school kids, maybe one school would have booked in for the day, but you'd have 4 schools arriving and so on. And you kind of deal with all that.
Yeah.
So, as I say, you're getting all of this kind of energy around. But at the very beginning, we were doing a little bit of sort of online engagement and such as well. There were a certain amount of people with genuine concerns now, both online and in person, that we were going to unleash something upon the world, right?
Yeah.
That we were messing with something as they saw it, um, that should not be interfered with, right? And one morning, I remember we went in and somebody had left a Bible open in the middle of the trench,
Really?
like a proper
Wow.
old school, like not a little
Yeah.
one that you carry around, but like one of those massive ones you'd see in a church or something. So they'd hold
At
that all the way
home.
up. Yeah, they'd left that in the. So and maybe they were right, not at all. Yeah, it was funny. I remember there was at least one, if not a few groups doing seances in the Hellfire Club as we're digging outside. And, as I say, people going around it backwards and all of this kind of stuff. You'd hear chanting and all of this.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit odd. I mean, nothing sort of, there was no bolt of lightning or anything like that when we were doing anything, nobody in the group suddenly turned a bit strange and started murdering the others, so like that, So, but yeah, definitely with the Bible and stuff, there was you could see that it loomed large in people's psyche. I think,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
very interesting. Just out of curiosity as well for myself, what are some of
Mhm.
the stories you heard from some of the students, if any kind of come to mind immediately for you? Just
Yeah,
curious, and or just in your own process of talking to probably friends
yeah.
and family about your dig as well.
Yeah, as I say, there's a lot of stories, and sometimes you kind of see repeat stories coming out and repeat themes and so on. Now, if you go into the school's folklore collection on dukas.ie, which is a wonderful resource for all over Ireland, if people aren't familiar, in the 1930s, they had school children recording stories from the locality, from older people in the locality about things like folklore or traditional cures or ghost stories and such. So you can put in anywhere in Ireland and you'll get some fabulous stories.
It's an
But
incredible
there's a
project.
few, amazing. And do you know what? I keep wishing they'd redo it, now just to see how it's changed over that century or so. I think it'd be a fabulous thing. But there are quite a few for the Hellfire Club. And there's, for example, there was one occasion where a parish priest was in there, went in there to confront the members, if I remember rightly, and they were all sitting. He found them all sitting at a table, and at the head of the table was a black cat, and he threw holy water at the black cat, which then sort of like exploded and blasted out through the ceiling. Right? So that was one. There was another one where they were playing cards in there, and this is a story which has been, I think, stolen and taken down to the Hook Peninsula to Lafters Hall, but it's first accounted at the Hellfire Club that somebody got brought into play, was playing cards with a gentleman in there, and he dropped a card, and he noticed the person sitting at the head of the table had cloven hooves instead of feet. There's a lot of stories about sort of, black masses and such. And a lot of the early stories, you can see there's a very Catholic feel to them,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and there are a few kind of stories, local ones about, um, you know, people being buried in there and so on. There was a story about virgins being sacrificed in there, people being put into a barrel of scalthine, which was a mix of whiskey with hot melted butter and set on fire in a barrel and thrown down a hill, and all of these kind of tales.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that sort of trope coming
A lot
out
of
a lot.
drama, a lot of spectacle, darkness,
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of that is a result of the actual historical Hellfire Club and the stories they liked people to tell about them.
Oh yeah,
A
for sure.
lot of this is them seeding some of these stories out there. And like in fairness, from doing research into them as an organization and into the individuals, there's truth to some of this stuff, like, which is pretty dark. It is debauchery, it is murder,
Yeah.
involved. So it's kind of, it's pretty grim stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of like essentially sort of almost true crime level stuff
Mhm.
that's happened with the original Hellfire Club members as well. Yeah, there's a dark
Yeah.
history there,
Yeah.
and a history of them, like you said, stirring up rumors about their own dramatic persona
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
this kind of behavior as well, which is yeah. So from my own kind of curiosity, then there was one story that I had heard when I was
Mhm.
younger about the Hellfire Club that I'd love to know if there's any if there's any truth to this,
Mhm.
which is that there one story that I heard a lot was that the stones were used, in the building of the Hellfire Club from the Curran there as well. But
Mhm.
someone said very famously that it was used as like sort of a capstone or a headstone on the fireplace inside the Hellfire
Mhm.
Club. I was wondering, like, how true is that potentially at this point?
Well, it's not potentially, it is true.
It
We've
is
proven
true.
that now. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, because I was inside the Hellfire Club last summer doing an excavation. In each of the rooms, we put a trench into the floor. So the looking at ways to the building itself is actually, in terms of conservation, it's in a very bad condition,
Really?
and it's in quite a precarious state. When it came into state hands, like in, I think, the 40s, thereabouts, one of the things they did was they sprayed it with like liquid concrete on the inside, and what that's meant is the building doesn't breathe properly. Still needs to breathe, and so structural failings are beginning to happen. And if conservation works don't happen in the relatively near future, the building will collapse. So I'd noticed when, and my colleagues had noticed as well when we were doing our excavation, that there were certain stones in the building which appeared to potentially be what you would call greywacky, which is a type of sandstone, which the curbstone that we found during the dig, which had the megalithic art on, greywacky. All the carved stones at Newgrange and so on are greywacky, right? And so we spotted a couple of stones used as lintels above the doorways, and we spotted a couple of stones in the corners and such, and one or two in the fireplace that we thought, well, maybe. And in the process last year of doing the dig and in preparation of the conservation plan, Dr. Steve Mantle, who's a geologist, identified them all as greywacky as well. So it's confirmed. And not alone that, we also identified that there's other stones when you look very carefully and you start to see, you'll see a lot of the small stones that make up the fabric of the building are actually taken directly from the cairn. There's even quartz. You'll see quite a lot of quartz, but there's one little place where you can see porphyry used, the same porphyry used for making the accent is
Wow.
embedded in the wall, right?
Oh my God.
And on top of that, when we were excavating the floor surfaces, now what we wanted to do is, because you walk inside the Hellfire Club now and it's just like a layer of muck, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't know, did any potential floor surface survive below that? Could there be stone floors? There be wooden floors or tiles, or how were they made, right? So we wanted to try that. So we put trenches into each floor, and what we found was that essentially, do you know that it's built as barrel vaults, right?
Yeah.
So if you imagine a barrel vault, so you've got a kind of high point in the middle, and then it slopes off on either side. They filled that with earth to level it off, and then when it was leveled off, they put down this kind of layer of sort of like a sort of mortary, sandy layer that then they would have either laid stone or floorboards or tiles on. But those tiles are gone, or those stones are gone, because the building itself was quarried when it fell into ruin.
Yeah.
But the earth that they used to fill up those barrel vaults is identical to the earth we found in the passage tomb. So not alone did they take the stone, they took the earth. What we're looking at is a reconstructed, recycled Neolithic tomb in the form now of a hunting lodge, which has all of these associations of, debauchery and such that
That
come
is
alongside.
so incredibly eerie and wonderful in a
Yes.
way, and
Yeah.
also terrible.
It was
Oh my
funny digging
God.
inside it as well, because it was August and it was just myself and a few guys, and it was beautiful, bright, sunny days, and inside it was so dark and eerie. We had these little, they were battery powered, but they looked like something from Oliver Twist, little lanterns around the places we were taking. And I think people peering in the windows, just seeing this going on, thinking we look like, I don't know, grave robbers or something, looking at that. It was a very strange experience to dig inside the Hellfire Club. It really was. Yeah.
But we were up there just recently, the whole group of us, developers,
Mhm.
kind of as a little bit of a celebratory thing, and I snuck up a candelabra as well, so just for a couple of
Nice.
photos up there, and I think we got some weird looks as well from some people looking in and seeing people walking around with a full candelabra in this kind of gothic
Yeah.
looking foreboding kind of
Yeah.
building. Yeah,
Yeah. I kind of deserves that kind of a feel as well.
doing it justice.
But like even on that, I mean, it's afterlife is really interesting to me. Essentially, the story it tells us is you've got this 5,500 year old tomb that gets completely destroyed to build something in 1725 that we know within 50 years had already become a ruin. So they destroy something 5,000 years old to build something that only lasted for 50. And then the kind of gnarly look it has today is because when Queen Victoria was coming into Dublin port, somebody put tar barrels on the roof and set them on fire as a beacon,
Really?
and the whole building went up then. So it's in a pretty bad state, as I say. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's had all these kind of strange stories attached to it as
But it's funny how that then transforms into a story that's sort of enduring in a very small sense
well.
to sort of the people and that kind of folklore and story, and then that in a small way maybe feeds back to you, sort of pulls you up there, and then to uncover something in a sense much more significant and much more ancient. It's funny
Absolutely.
how the stories kind of pass hands or something else. Yeah.
But that's it. And do you know what? That's the thing with archaeology. And often folklore, it's the way, folklore and mythology and legends and so on. Some people get like it's all 100% true all the time, and that's not right. And some people completely dismiss it out of hand as just being kind of ill tales, and that's not right. They can often hold messages in there. After all, these stories are the way that people are making meaning of their surroundings, and trying to interpret what they see. And okay, they don't have the scientific information or methodologies or understanding to go, okay, that's a 5,000-year-old tomb or whatever. But they do know that there was a special thing there that was then destroyed, and maybe William Connolly dying shortly after that happened within a few years, was a result of that. And,
Yeah.
all of these kind of tales then kind of start evolving and being passed down and reflecting the generation that's telling that tale and gets embellished and added to and changed, and I think you see that with the Hellfire Club, especially.
Yeah. It's interesting, I suppose, in a sense, Eyes of Hellfire is our sort of modern day telling of that tale
Mhm.
around that
Mhm.
building and that group and that history. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
very interesting. I wonder in the future what kind of stories will be told about the Hellfire Club and what kind of
Yeah.
things people would share. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing. It's what draws me to archaeology, and it's certainly what draws me to places like that. I think as people, we make, as I say, we make sense of the world by telling stories. And I think it's fabulous to see storytelling in the form of video games. Which I think are a terrific way to do it. I think once you get that interactivity and stuff, somehow for me anyway, the stories kind of sink in a little bit deeper and all. So I think it's fabulous that places as old as that have an enduring place in our culture and can evolve, and hopefully, as I say, I'd love to see things like the school's folklore collection redone, just to see how what stories have been forgotten, but which ones endure at the same time as well. I
Oh,
think
it'd be
it'd be really
fantastic
cool.
to see that. Yeah, I would.
Mm,
Yeah, equally, I would love to see that kind of project continue as well, because it's
mm.
like you said, it's stories are absolutely so important. They're fundamental to who we are as human beings, and
Yeah,
they carry things with them that we either can't or sometimes just won't, maintain in so any kind of physical sense. And you know,
yeah.
I 100% agree with you on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to playing the game. Do people like Henry
Yeah.
Barry and so on featured the guys from the Hellfire Club?
We have
That
kind of
get
a
coming up?
slightly fictionalized
Okay, cool.
version of the series of events and things as well. Yeah.
Hey, very good,
But
good.
we take a lot of inspiration from Irish folklore, from stories that
Mm.
we've heard around the Hellfire Club. You've given me a few ideas now in just this chat, even. Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
good.
and we try to sort of represent some of the modern day kind of urban legend aspects as well. The stories of
Yeah,
people saying staying overnight, and the Hellfire Club will let you see the future or meet the devil or something as well.
yeah.
Have you stayed overnight in the Hellfire Club yourself?
Do you know what? I haven't. I don't know. Like every time I go up there, there's so many raves happening there overnight. I think the your chances of getting any sleep, I think it would be fairly slim. There was a guy who did stay overnight there. He's actually quite well. He's famous if you're interested in the kind of revolutionary history. He's a guy called General Halt, and he was one of the leaders of the 1798 rebellion. And after the defeat at Vinegar Hill, a group of the rebels went sort of northwards as well, and he found himself. He ended up spending the night in the Hellfire Club, and he wrote an account of this most amazing, inspiring, beautiful sunrise that he saw there. But on the night, his brother lived not far away, and he sent down to his brother for what was it, a pint of whiskey and a loaf of bread and some cheese. And I think if somebody gave
How
me a
much
pint of whiskey,
priorities in mind?
yeah, I think if I had a pint of whiskey, I could stay overnight there. I think it wouldn't be
That's
too bad.
the condition. That's your condition
Yeah,
for doing it.
yeah, yeah, that'd be grand, I think. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you do see a lot of people kind of camping up there, and so and you do see it. Anytime we're getting closer to Halloween and such, you know, it suddenly looms up again in people's minds, and I think that's wonderful. I think that's great, and it's a place we should all cherish it. It doesn't matter necessarily that people kind of have different views about its story and such. The important thing is that it is loved and cherished and appreciated, and hopefully it will still be there to spook out future generations down the road.
Hopefully, with the two of us, kind of in our own ways, doing what we're doing, we'll bring some more eyes to it and make
Yeah,
people a
yeah,
bit more aware of some stuff that also might need to be done to kind of keep it in the condition it's in, and maybe improve things a bit. And yeah,
yeah.
it's and get some eyes
Absolutely.
on it most of all, and yeah, give a bit
Well,
more
that's it.
context too.
That's it. I mean, it's such an interesting place, and I mean, as I say, the broader Dublin mountains, even with the Hellfire Club and all the other ones where you've got these ancient tombs, one thing I think is really special, right? And I always find it really nice because you walk around these prehistoric landscapes today, and you've got things like mobile phone masts, Sitka spruce plantations, pathways, this, that, and the other, right? So the landscape has visually changed quite a lot.
Yeah.
But what hasn't changed at all are those contours of the hill. So as your legs are going up tired, getting up to the Hellfire Club, bear in mind that that's exactly the same experience that somebody had about 5,500 years ago as they were carrying rocks up there to
I
build
was
this
thinking that
ancient
actually when
tomb.
we were on our hike recently. I was thinking, God, someone did this while carrying so many stones up and down this
Yes.
hill.
Yeah. But I mean, that might have been like a form of veneration in a way.
Mm,
You're giving your part to this, maybe that'll bring you fortune, or maybe that'll bring you the benevolence of the gods or such.
yeah.
Who knows the way they saw it at the time. But I do like that shared experience of
Yeah, the
tired legs.
symbolic placing of the stone. Yeah, building the
Mm,
foundation of something. Yeah, it's really
yeah.
interesting. And I had a similar experience when walking up the hill. thinking about carrying stones, not so much an expression of exhaustion, although there's a little bit of
Mhm.
that there, but it's
Yeah,
also thinking it's that connection with a meaningful history, isn't it? It's
yeah,
I was even at the time purely thinking about the Hellfire Club, but if you think about that even greater and bring it back to like a megalithic period, it's just it's
yeah.
almost mind-boggling, just the connection that
Really.
we've had to that bit of land for so long.
That's exactly it. And what drew them, the beautiful views, the being able to see for miles around and see the other hills around you. That's the same thing that keeps us going back today. People are people after all. We love stories, we love a good view. And that place has them in abundance. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. And I also think, in a certain sense, and this might just be my love of things with a certain level of darkness to them as well. But there's always
Mhm.
also seemingly a connection with death and the afterlife there for so
Mhm.
long as well, and that's kind of enduring and really, in
Yeah.
a sense, pervades all things, and all things,
Yeah.
especially structures that we build, feel
Yeah.
very like, no, I will outlast time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
It, it,
an
it,
interesting connection.
no, it is. And it's funny, right? Because when we think about people in the Neolithic, the most visible expression we have of them on a landscape today are their tombs, right? But the tombs are, the way people view death even today in different sort of cultures is very, very different, right? I brought up in the northwest of England, brought up very strongly Catholic. My mum's Catholic, but I never went to a wake until I came to Ireland. It's just not done
Oh,
in
really?
that way, right? So even where you've got two almost identical sort of upbringings, you could still have, when it comes to rituals around death and the practice of death, you can still have quite dramatically different processes for that, right? And when we're looking at these monuments, and particularly like, if you go to visit Nouth or Newgrange, as I say, these aren't just, I guess, places where you put the dead to forget about them. The idea of the passageway is that it can be accessed again, that people can go in and out to a degree. Now, who was allowed to do that is open to question. Maybe there was a certain sort of equivalent of a priestly sort of caste, special men or women that were allowed to, and nobody else. Who knows? But also the expression of art all the way around side kind of gives you the impression of people gathering around side. So if you see the winter solstice celebrations these days at Newgrange or up the road from us here at Knockrow, you get hundreds of people
Yeah.
being along there to mark the season, change it and such. And it's interesting to kind of think about these places and what they would have meant. I always wonder why you would go to the trouble of building tombs up on top of mountains, because I'm very interested in these upland cemeteries. And for me, there's a couple of potential reasons. We'll never get the exact dead right reason because the people that could have told us that don't exist anymore. But it's interesting. I think the association with the sky is a big one for a lot of cultures. I mean, ask
Mm.
any kid now, point to heaven. Where are they going to point, right? But you see that as well with Persia. You see it all over the world. There's an association with the sky. So that's part of it. There's also sort of a practical sort of aspect. Now, this might be a little territorially minded, but these would have been hugely visible signifiers on the landscape. These monuments, they would have been
Yeah.
some of the biggest things on the landscape. And if you're coming into Dublin Bay, because these people traveled extensively by sea, Ireland was not cut off at all at this time. We share a culture with the Western Atlantic seaboard, really,
Yeah.
of Europe. Um, you would have seen these tombs up on the mountains as you're coming into Dublin Bay, so you would have known that people already lived here, that you could trade with or interact with in that sort of way, but it wasn't sort of empty land that you could do what you like. So there's that sort of territorial. But also, I think if you were down in those fertile plains below, how reassuring it would be to constantly look up to the horizon and see your ancestors up there watching over you as you live, as you work the fields, as you clear the land. I think there's many reasons for why they might have done it. And I think when we're thinking about the monumentality of a landscape like the Hellfire Club, for William Connolly, he wanted his hunting lodge there, much like that middle thing, like as a statement on the landscape that he could see it from miles around, and everyone could see that he owned this land. And he had now turned it into one of the largest deer parks in Ireland. That he was wealthy enough to do that. He bought the whole land holding from the Duke of Wharton for I think £62,000, which is a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So there's all of these reasons for it, but I think the Dublin Mountains are something a little bit special, and it's really I spend a lot of my time trying to encourage people to see them a bit differently than we do, because there's huge stories there, and yes, people enjoy going for a hike there, but yeah, following in the footsteps when you're doing that hike of an awful lot of generations before us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you mentioned as well about William Connolly, like
Mhm,
taking that, megalithic essentially passage tomb and
mhm.
transferring it into something for sort of his own kind of demonstration of sort of, I suppose, in a sense, wealth and power.
Yeah,
That's something that's kind of touched on a bit in our themes of our game as well. There's a
fantastic.
very critical eye levied
Yeah,
at the members of the Hellfire Club too.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, that's the interesting thing. I'd say Connolly, even to this day, if people destroy a ring fort, or as they're often known in parts of rural Ireland, fairy
very
forts,
forts. Yeah,
there's still a little bit of a sort of, you know, um, taboo about that. There's a lot of concern, and I love the sort of the duality of the Irish belief when it comes
yeah.
to the fairies, because it's like you ask somebody, "Oh, do you believe in the fairies?" And they're
You're
like,
like,
"No, no,
no,
I'm not
absolutely
sure of
not.
that." Would you go and cut down that tree? No,
No.
not at all. No, I wouldn't go near it.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
I know some
So
people, some adults as well, who I know who, I
yeah,
talk about going up to the Hellfire Club, and they're like, really? And like, well,
yeah.
you don't think it's cursed or haunted? It's like, no, 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 no.
No, no, no.
I just keep a healthy distance.
No, this is it.
Yeah,
This is it. So it's that kind of, you deny it on one level, but there's a little undercurrent in an awful lot
yeah.
of people here, which make you a little bit nervous
The
about
Irish
doing certain things.
caution.
Yeah, unless you're in Egypt like me and you look at it too and go, "Oh no, I wonder about that." I'm gonna go and risk it just to get the story.
And you mentioned a bit earlier as well
Mhm.
that stories and games, stuff like that. So I can assume then that you're a bit of a gamer yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
love it.
So
Yeah,
are you planning on giving Eyes of Hellfire a bit of a go then?
I'd love
Soon?
to. I'd love to. At the moment, I'm on the PlayStation a bit, and I'm trying to. There's a group of lads I'm regularly on there with, and I'm trying to drag them across to give it a go on Steam, because I think it'll be awesome, and I love that kind of game as well. I mean, I started out now. This is gonna dramatically age me, but I started out on the Atari, which still had wooden panels. So I've been through the Spectrum, the Commodore 64, but some of the happiest times I had on games were stuff like Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. Those where you got to
Yeah.
point and you click and work out how you solve the puzzle to get to the next bit, and
Yeah.
so
We
it's
love a
right up
point
my
and click.
street.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of a thing where there's a bit of a story to it, and you're trying to advance your knowledge. Yeah, I love that kind of thing. So it's right up the street. So looking forward to giving it a whirl.
Brilliant. And yeah. And you can give us a bit of a critical eye, not too critical,
No,
hopefully.
no,
I think we're
yeah.
fairly historically accurate.
So long as when you put part two out, it doesn't have some bumbling archaeologist going around with a funny
Oh,
accent.
we'll scrap the character. So, well, I hope when you get to have a go at the game that you have a good time and that you survive as well.
I'm, I'm sure it will. I think it's terrific, and as I said, I love to see people storytelling in different ways that involves Irish heritage and some of the fantastic stories that we have here. Because you don't need to go into fiction. The tales in the landscape here are so rich, and it's brilliant to see something inspired by that. It's fabulous. Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing to be able to draw from something that a lot of us grew up with and have
Mm.
heard about all our lives and into our adult lives as well, and to make something of it, and then to, like we said, direct more eyes upwards towards the terrifying, foreboding, hanging Hellfire Club.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's great.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Neil, for chatting with me about this today, and maybe we can have another chat in the future at some point as well.
No, I'd love to. I'd love to. And
Take
like,
your
if it ain't,
historical criticism on for the game.
yeah, exactly. If you get in a thematic kind of thing, yeah, if you need an advisor on that. And if anyone's interested in learning more about the Hellfire Club, we actually got a full ebook on the excavation that you can have for free. It's on our website on the abarta.heritage.ie as well. So you can kind of, to forgive the pun, dig into the story of the geology of the
You were
folklore.
waiting for that, weren't you?
I was
Waiting to
waiting
get
for
that
that
in.
one. That's it. But there
Brilliant.
you go.
Thanks so much, Neil. Thanks again.
No problem. That's great.